Yo, what's going on, y'all? It's Cone back here again today with another video, and we've got some more breaking news. The offseason never stops with the NBA. There's always something to talk about, news that could be broken. And over the past week or so, we've been hearing rumors left and right that the Sacramento Kings are poised to do something big. First, it was rumors that they were in talks to get Brandon Ingram, and then it was more so that they were looking for DeMar DeRozan. And this morning, we got a report that he was heading to Sacramento to kind of talk with them. The deal seemed all but finished, and we've officially now learned that DeMar DeRozan has been traded to the Sacramento Kings in a sign and trade on a 3-year, I believe it's $74 million deal, right around that. And it's a 3-teamer. Harrison Barnes, as well as a 2031 pick swap, go to the Spurs. Chris Duarte, 2 second-round picks and cash go to the Bulls, with, of course, DeRozan landing solely with the Sacramento Kings. So let's break this one down. I want to talk about the Spurs and Bulls side of things, and then we'll get into the Kings, because obviously they're the squad that I have the most to say. They get the big name in this whole thing. First of all, the Bulls completely fumbled the value of all their star players over the course of the past few years. I don't think this is a bad return in its own right for a sign and trade. 2 second-round picks, an interesting player, Chris Duarte, who at first I was like, oh, cool, they got a young guy. I forget he's 27 years old. Like, he's older than Shea, than Luka, than Tatum, was obviously really old going into his draft class. So not really a young player, but I guess maybe he could find some value over there for Chicago. But this is kind of your typical get back for a sign and trade. It's just unfortunate because they could have gotten so much more for DeRozan as well as Caruso, and definitely for Zach LaVine, who I don't even know if they're going to be able to trade without attaching an asset to now over the past couple of years, whether it was last offseason, this past deadline, the deadline before. They've just completely fumbled this thing. But overall, in this vacuum instance, I don't think this is a bad return for a sign and trade, but of course could have gotten way more earlier on. For the San Antonio Spurs, big winners of this trade, they just go ahead and get involved to take on Harrison Barnes' contract to make the money work, because the Bulls didn't want to take the salary back. And Harrison Barnes isn't great anymore. Like, his contract isn't the best, but he's better than a lot of other players on the Spurs. You just add him to that depth chart, can help you be a bit more competitive now, alongside Chris Paul coming into town with a second-year Wemby, Devin Vassell, Keldon Johnson. The Spurs are interesting. Plus, that 2031 pick swap coming from the Kings, out of all teams, who just went through a playoff drought that was like the longest one that I've ever seen. That's a big deal. That could be a very valuable pick swap. They have so many great picks and swaps coming down the line, with the Hawks seemingly imploding. The Spurs just do things right. If you're a rebuilding team, you should try and get in on these transactions any way you can and just bring back assets. They did exactly that. Love this for the Spurs. And then we get to the Sacramento Kings. And I put out there on Twitter a couple of days ago that I didn't feel like DeRozan was the star the Kings should be going for, because I think the fit is a little bit strange with him in Sacramento. But the more that I take a look at this now that it's officially happened, I do like this acquisition. It's not my favorite one in the world, and I think there's more work to be done, but ultimately I do think it's a move the Kings had to go ahead and make. Mainly because a couple of years ago, you went ahead and ended that aforementioned playoff drought. You made it back, the beam was lit up, everything was great, you were a top 4 seed, and then you lose in the first round to the Golden State Warriors. Okay, you're a young team, they're the most experienced team you could have faced in that first round. It went to 7 games, and you had one of the best first round series we've seen in a long time. So ultimately, it sucks, but it's not the end of the world. You just get back next year. But the Western Conference was clearly getting better, and they did nothing to improve. They just hoped that Keegan Murray would have a breakout year, that Fox and Sabonis another year to gel, and some of those pieces would go ahead and get the job done. And they missed the playoffs entirely. They were a game away from making it. They were in the play-in game against the New Orleans Pelicans, but they ended up getting their butt kicked in that game, of course, being the Warriors beforehand. And then a new playoff drought streak begins. Next year, the West is going to be even better. The Grizzlies are going to be back. The Thunder are getting better. The Mavericks have really figured things out. The Timberwolves, the Nuggets. There are so many great squads in the Western Conference. You cannot risk running it back again. You have to make some type of move, add more talent. And that's what they do with DeRozan, who does add an interesting wrinkle offensively when it comes to that mid-range scoring. That's something the Kings aren't that great at. DeRozan is, of course, a maestro, one of the best mid-range scorers of this generation. Even up there in his older age, he's still elite in that area of the court. He also adds another elite clutch scorer to this team. He's been one of the clutchest players in the league the past few seasons, and now he's going to be alongside De'Aaron Fox, who won it last year, Malik Monk, who's one of the most clutch players in the league this season. If you get to the final few minutes against the Kings, you're going to have a really hard time with those 3 guys out there on the court, and they can form a dynamic offense. The spacing is the concern, because DeRozan isn't a volume or knockdown 3-point shooter. Even though with the Bulls he's had some pretty solid years, he's shown a bigger willingness to take them at times with Chicago. though, it's still not up there with the best in the NBA. Maybe he'll try to kind of lean into that more with the Kings. They're going to need him to space the floor for Fox, who loves to attack and get downhill with his elite speed. For Sabonis, who doesn't have that outside shot, that's kind of the biggest worry I have there, is how that duo is going to share the court at the same time. What's it going to look like? Mike Brown is an amazing head coach, if you ask me, so I think there's a lot of great ways to scheme that to make it so that the court is more open. Plus, you do have shooters like De'Aaron Fox, even though he likes to attack inside, has become a really solid three-point shooter recently. You've got Kevin Huerter out there, Malik Monk, Keegan Murray, guys that can all knock it down at a pretty high rate on decent volume. So overall, I don't think the spacing is going to be the end of the world, even if it may be a bit clunky, and I do think it's going to take time to get used to. We'll see, though. I do trust Mike Brown to kind of put them in the spots to succeed, and if it really clicks, this could be, once again, elite, really threatening offense. The defense is a concern because, yeah, DeRozan is going to help you on that end. You, I think, still have to make more additions. The DeRozan move, the reason I like it is because they can still make more additions. They didn't give up Kevin Huerter, who's a bigger contract. They didn't have to give up like a bunch of first-round picks. They can still make more acquisitions, and I think that should be the route they go. This should not be the only move they make. While I do think ultimately DeRozan in place for Harrison Barnes makes them better, there are still holes on this roster. If we take a look at their depth chart, this is a team that doesn't exactly have the depth chart that you would want if you're trying to compete with some of the really deep teams in the Western Conference. You've got De'Aaron Fox and Keon Ellis at the guard spot with Devin Carter. You've got Kevin Huerter, Malik Monk, DeRozan, Jalen McDaniels, who they picked up recently when they traded Davion Mitchell over there to the Raptors. Trey Lyles coming off the bench behind Keegan Murray, and Alex Len behind Sabonis. Really, it's the front court. I mean, in the backcourt between Fox, Ellis, Huerter, and Monk, that's a pretty good four group of guys. You could also do a couple different combinations, like Ellis could run the two to add some more defense if you're worried about DeRozan being inserted in that lineup. If you want to add more defense, you can do Keon Ellis there. You can put Malik Monk in the closing lineup if you want to keep him off the bench to start. I think that's understandable. Or you can move him into the starting lineup if you just want more of an offensive punch, really go all in on the scoring. If you just want a good off-ball shooter, Kevin Huerter works there. A lot of routes you can go, but yeah, having McDaniels, Lyles, and Len as your first three guys off the bench in the front court is a little bit scary. So I do still want to see if they can make an upgrade in that regard. It doesn't have to be a massive name. Just add someone who can defend and knock down some outside shots off the bench. Like, I think Dorian Finney-Smith would be a solid addition if they could somehow get Cam Johnson. I would love him as an addition too. Just got to continue to make more moves. This should not be the only one, even though, again, I do think this makes them a better team, but it doesn't make them a contender in the Western Conference. And obviously, that's where they want to go. They have got a great top two guys in Fox and Sabonis. They've got a great third guy in DeRozan. They just have to fill out the roster a bit more because you're going to compete with squads that are elite on both sides of the ball. So you really have to put talent here in Sacramento if you want to not only get back to the playoffs, but actually be a team that can compete later into the playoffs than just the first round exit you had a couple years ago. Another name that comes to mind for me is Jeremy Grant. I would like him a lot as an addition. If you put together the contracts of Kevin Huerter as well as Trey Lyles, the money seems to match up according to Fanspo. It might have changed because I don't think they have all the updated transactions, but I think there is a way to go ahead and make that work. The Blazers probably aren't asking for too much because his contract isn't the best, but I do think that's a really solid glue guy that you could put in that front court that would add some defense, add some off-ball shot making. I would like him a lot as an addition. Basically, I hope the Kings do more. I want to see them continue to add more talent alongside this DeRozan addition, even though it's fun. They got to add some defense, add some depth, because it was really fun watching the Kings be in the playoffs back in 2022. You know, the beam was a lot of fun to go ahead and follow, seeing them rise back up from the depths of the NBA. Again, that really long playoff drought, it ended. The atmosphere is electric at those playoff games. I want to go see a playoff game at Golden One Center at some point because the fans there seem like some of the best in the NBA. I want to see that, so I hope they can get back to the playoffs. If you're going to compete in this tough Western Conference, you need this team to click. You need the fit to be better than it maybe seems like it's going to be out there. You need the defense to really figure it out. Mike Brown has a lot on his plate. They've still got some work to do, if you ask me, in the general management front, but overall, I think this is a good trade. It makes sense. It's fine. This is one they had to go ahead and do to keep up with the talented Western Conference. I'm excited to see it out there. I'm excited that DeMar DeRozan gets a chance to compete. Obviously, if he stayed with the Bulls, that wasn't going to happen. This is also a big loss for teams like the Lakers, who DeRozan seemed like one of the last names they could theoretically add to really improve that squad. And now they're left as one of four teams that hasn't made an addition through free agency or trade so far this offseason, which is really rough because they seem like a squad that was inevitably going to make a trade of some kind, but DeJounte was off the board, and now DeRozan's off the board. it's getting dire out there if they want to improve, because that's another team that was a first-round exit in the Western Conference. They really need to get better. The Clippers were in the running for DeRozan. They strike out. The Heat were poorly in the running. They really haven't done much of anything. They strike out, so that's a little bit worrying too. There were a lot of teams in on DeRozan as like the last guy, felt like the last big domino to fall. And shout out to Sacramento for getting it done. This is a team that doesn't get a lot of big names. This is the biggest signing in free agent history for the franchise. It's a cool moment to go ahead and see. So excited for the Sacramento Kings, excited for Kings fans. Let me know what you thought about this trade, whether you're a Kings fan or just an outsider. Who do you think was the biggest winner of this deal? Do you think DeRozan with the Kings makes sense? What other moves would you make? And where, if the season started today, do you think the Kings could finish in the Western Conference? Do you think they could be a top 4 team, a top 6 team? Do you think they're a play-in squad? Or do you think they're still on the outside looking in of the play-in entirely? I appreciate you watching. Leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on future videos. Yeah, I'll see y'all later. Real one, say it back.